what's the thing that's just really annoying, or what is their biggest weakness? What's the biggest weakness in the code?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So I was building a e-commerce app, and I needed a payment scheme, and there was only one. And it's like, well, if I was doing it in other platforms, I could use Switch or Spike or whatever. So I stuck with one. And so basically, since it's new and you need a library, as you says, the GPS, so you might get a barrier, but that's kind of evolving fast. So it's got momentum, and this will fix itself. But I think, you know, at this stage, you might find a barrier, but I don't think that would be that should stop you, because, you know, if you waited for the exact perfect time, you know, everybody would rush past you and get their app to market before you.
So yeah, so like Flutter does the UI stuff really well. Any audio and video applications, you're really going to have to evaluate whether or not it's going to do what you need it to do. So the amount of latency between button taps, like doing a live musical instrument app in Flutter, it'd be dicey whether or not that it might work on Android. Doing live musical instrument on apps on Android is hard anyway, because the amount of time it takes between tap and music coming out is longer than typically on iOS. But yeah, so that ecosystem is missing entirely. Like if we didn't have a C++ guy or weren't willing to do C++, we couldn't have used this, whereas we could have got a lot of the way natively on Android and iOS. Video is the same, and the way that the message passing system works between the native code and Flutter doesn't work well with large amounts of data. So if you're taking a camera stream and feeding like a high definition, so just say you get like the latest and greatest Android or iPhone, and you can get 4 or 8K from the camera, you are not streaming that through the message bus system. Well, you could, but it wouldn't be good. It'd get really janky. It's all happening on a single thread. So you can definitely fall down there. And I've seen video apps that have done it, and you've just got to be smart around the resolution that you request from the camera when you're displaying versus what you're writing out to files. And there's ways to work around it, but it's definitely dicey, and it's definitely more of a risk.
Wasn't there a hack to get a second thread going?
You can do second threads in Dart. It's well, they work on isolates, which is very similar to the JavaScript model, where you can fire up a separate thread with its own memory, and then you can do message passing, which copies the data. So it doesn't like give you an object; it copies the contents of that object from one thread to another. So you can definitely do multi-threading, right? Otherwise, you'd be blocking the UI every time you did a network request. But it's in terms of getting message through the bus from the native, I don't know how the threading system works there, but a lot of it's going to have to be done main thread to make sure you don't have race conditions and whatever on both ends. So I think there's definitely more things that I've come across and gone, hey, this is a pain. The build, okay, CI is being one pain for us. We're using CodeMagic. CodeMagic works brilliantly 90% of the time. It just stopped working for our Android build. For some reason, it doesn't produce one of the, because we've got native specific code in there, and it doesn't produce one of the ABI types for our library. So it crashes on launch. And so like it was just working. We just uploaded it to the Play Store. I pushed it out to our internal testers and crashed on launch. And so using the Flutter tool, just the Flutter CLI, and the Flutter CLI is another, like the documentation's not great. It's getting better, but it's still kind of a bit weird to use the Flutter if you're using the Flutter CLI directly. And yeah, we have to build from Gradle at the moment. And like, I know a lot about Gradle. I really like it, as much as most people think it's pulling hairs. So that's fine for us. But if you weren't a Gradle whiz and you're not interested in becoming one, then you can fall down on Android sometimes because of the way that those built systems interact.
Actually, one point on CodeMagic is if you've got a Windows machine, you could never build an iOS app. With CodeMagic, you push it up to CodeMagic and it'll produce you an iOS app without actually having an Apple. Like magic.
For what it's worth, I couldn't get my CI working on CodeMagic or the other one. Anyway, there's another one out there which has good Flutter support, so I use Azure DevOps for myself. it doesn't have a Flutter build out of the box, but I have a lot of experience with Azure DevOps, and there's no sort of pipeline template for Flutter, but I managed to get up and running quite quickly. And because I could configure each step, I didn't have the issues I had with CodeMagic, which tries to do everything out of the box for you.
I have one more thing that I want to add. Sorry, but persistence sucks on Flutter. So if you're not using, I haven't tried to use, they've got an SQLite wrapper now, but if you come from Android land where you've got like Realm, and Android or iOS, we've got Realm, or like SQLite on Android, it's just brilliant. It just makes persistence easy, whereas in Flutterland, if you're talking directly to SQLite, then you're writing multi-line strings with SQL create table stuff inside it. And
I used SQLite. I used a library. It was fine.
It was okay. I've just been so spoiled with Realm and SQLite that I don't want to do it manually anymore. Like I want it all generated and all done nicely for me with all of my migrations and all of my data models pre-populated for me. I don't want to have to write that myself. Like if I was going to do it, I'd probably use Kotlin multi-platform and SQLite to generate. So I'd use like Kotlin for all of my data layer stuff, and then use some sort of RPC bus to push, because you could do Kotlin multi-platform and target Android and iOS for your data layer, and then just use an RPC bus to push things through to Flutter from there. To hand, because SQLite is just so good when it comes to dealing with any SQL. Like, does anybody use SQLite here? Okay, if you do Android development and you have any SQL stuff, you should really check it out. It's amazing. Yeah.
Any more questions? So I have another one. So I think one thing I'm excited about Flutter is like you can do web development. So have you guys do you know something about web development with Flutter?
My answer is quick and easy, no.
I've been meaning to look at it, but not yet.
My personal landing page is in Flutter Web, which is really simple, and it's terrible. So bullwinkle.com, I haven't even checked if it's still up, but it should be there. It's just a GitHub pages. I just wanted to experiment with it. It's super simple. When I did it was in like release preview, and it was a pain to get set up at that point, like getting the, is that you had this kind of, you can have Dart installed as an operating system level package, or you can use the Flutter's bundled Dart, and that then depends. So depending on, there's a tight coupling between the Flutter version you're using and the Dart version you're using. So like I have stable, beta, dev, and master all installed on my machine because you need master to do desktop, and then at the time you needed master or dev to do web. And so there was a bit of pain in getting my path set up to be able to talk to the right Dart installation for running the web side of things, and also publishing to GitHub pages. And performance was crap when I did it. Like you could really see, even, so this is a simple page with like a stupid picture in the background and 3 icons on it. And when the click and the material design animation, ripple animation, you could even see that was janky. So performance was a real problem when I did it, but my understanding is it's better now, but I haven't done anything significant with it in probably nearly a year. At least 7 months.
And I think you probably have to build it up, correct me if I'm wrong, build it up with the idea that it's going to be for web, because you start using a lot of components that are specifically mobile, and they might not translate over to the web. So if it was a greenfield project and you knew you were going web, you'd probably build it accordingly, but when it started it was still in beta, and they didn't quite know what they're going to do with it.
That's another thing you should have reminded me. I'm really sorry. Sorry, guys. So I watched some of the videos from the Flutter Interact conference in December last year. So at that point, they were talking about covering some of the deficits. And at the moment, Flutter is specifically designed for mobile and mobile form factors. Like it's not even, you can do a tablet, or you can do a phone. Like you could do a desktop experience, or you could do a mobile experience. But that, what do they call it, dynamic resizing of objects as a screen for different screen sizes isn't very well supported yet. So they're working on that at the moment, being able to handle that, like different screen sizes. And like if you do anything in React, you've got the different size classes in your CSS, so you can restyle things based on the width of a screen. And that's not supported in Flutter yet, but they are working on it. So, because I'll need that for desktop support, which is also coming soon. So any sort of desktop and tablet form factor where you can resize windows, you really need to be able to support that, and it's just not done. So yeah, like I think if you were doing just a full screen desktop web app, you'd be fine, but anything aside from that, and you're rolling your own solution, which you can do, but it'd be, yeah, it'd be questionable the value in it, because you'd rip it out and replace it with whatever the Flutter team gives you in the near future.
If there's no more questions, sorry, just one more, last question.
Sorry, Kelvin, you mentioned before that you've got a lot of Android users, but not very many iOS users. Is there any limitation with Flutter as to why it would be that?
No, interestingly, the app it runs better on iOS. Like it's again just because of the audio aspect of it. So the amount of time it takes to fill an audio buffer on iOS is like 6 milliseconds, whereas it can be up to 20 milliseconds depending on the Android device. So everything just runs a lot smoother because of that, right? Like we can get sound out of the speakers quicker on iOS. So no, there is no reason. It's just that cost to acquire iOS users is significantly higher than cost to acquire Android users. And also, because music apps are better on iOS, there is a lot of them. Whereas the amount of music apps available on Android is very small, right? Like you can count on two hands the total number, whereas iOS is totally saturated. So it's a much easier market to penetrate because most people ignore Android. Like, you know, I think if we couldn't have done Flutter, we probably would have gone iOS, which would have killed us. Whereas Flutter allowed us to go both platforms and see which one is working better. And we support both of them without any significantly extra overhead.
And it helps having like a genius C++ developer.
It really does, yeah. His code's terrible, but geez, he's a genius. As long as you don't have to edit it or read it, it's amazing.
Cool.
He'll fully admit that. I'm not saying anything he doesn't know.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ben, Len, and Kevin. Feel free to ask them questions after we finish here. So we will have this room until 7:30. So before that, like, feel free to talk to anyone, and hopefully we can see you again next month. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.